I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Austin right now, sipping an $8 latte that tastes like freedom. My parents, Tess and Michelle Novak, don't know where I live. My brother, Colin Webster, doesn't have my new number, and for the first time in a decade, my bank account is growing instead of bleeding into a black hole. My name is Peyton Frazier. I'm 34, a senior software engineer, a job my parents call computer stuff. Up until 6 months ago, I was the family ATM with a pulse and a guilt complex. My older brother, Colin, has never met a job he couldn't quit or a relative he couldn't mooch off of. Growing up, he was the golden child. I was the one who did the homework while he threw the parties. The only creature who truly saw me was Shiam, my French Bulldog. While my parents praised Colin's creative development, code for sitting on the couch, Shiam sat at my feet while I pulled all-nighters for my degree. He's a small dog, but when he leans his weight against your shin, he makes you feel anchored when the world is trying to drift you away. 3 months ago, it was Sunday lunch. My mom, Michelle, was making Colin's favorite pot roast. My dad, Tess, was wearing his serious conversation cardigan. Colin and his wife, Ellie Holt, were already there. "Peyton," my dad said, setting down his fork, "we need to talk. Colin lost his job at the mattress store. The boss didn't appreciate his ideas." "Financial help," my mom interrupted. $4,000 a month, just for a few months, Peyton. You can afford it. Family helps family." I looked around the table, at my parents' expectation, at Colin's entitlement. I looked down at Shiam. He was under the table, his warm, sturdy little body pressed firmly against my left ankle. "Stay heavy," he seemed to say. "Don't let them lift you." "No," I said. The silence was immediate. "What?" my mom whispered. I said no. I'm done. In fact, I'm selling my house and moving far away. "If you walk out," my dad said, "don't expect to be welcomed back." "Okay," I said quietly, "because I'm not coming back." I stood up, whistled for Shiam, and walked toward the door. I'd spent 10 years regretting things I did for them. I decided right then I'd like to try regretting something I did for myself. I walked out into the sunlight, Shiam's nails clicking a steady, confident rhythm on the driveway behind me. The Novak family has lived off my hard work for years, but the bank is officially closed, and for the first time, I'm not looking back.
The guilt didn't come. That was the first thing that scared me. I sat in my car outside Tess and Michelle Novak's house, waiting for the familiar wave to crash over me, the nausea, the second guessing. Instead, there was just quiet. Shiam sat in the passenger seat, his chin on the windowsill, watching a squirrel with unblinking focus. My phone started buzzing immediately. "Mom, Peyton, please come back." "Dad, you are being selfish." "Colin, are you really doing this to me?" "Ellie Holt, the kids are going to be devastated." That last one from Ellie almost got me, but then I remembered I'd bought their Christmas presents, their birthdays, their school supplies, and how many times had they visited my house? 0. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, clipped Shiam into his harness, and drove home. I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. I didn't spiral. I Googled, how to sell a house fast, best cities for remote tech workers, how to block family members. By midnight, I had a plan. By Monday morning, I had a realtor named Janet. She walked through my house, nodding. "You've taken good care of this place," she said. "I had to," I told her. "No one else was going to." By Wednesday, the for sale sign was in my yard, and by Thursday morning at exactly 9:47 a.m., my mother was standing on my front porch. I watched her through the window. Her hair was uncombed. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong. "Peyton, I know you're in there," she shouted. I stayed on the couch. Shiam trotted to the door, sniffed the crack, and then, to my surprise, turned his back on it and walked back to me. He jumped onto the sofa and curled into a snoring ball against my hip. He wasn't even going to give her a bark. "I can see your shadow moving," my mom shouted. I typed back a text. Then you know I'm not answering. She lasted 45 minutes. I watched her trudge back to her car. I felt bad for about 30 seconds. Then I remembered the Sunday lunch ambush and went back to my search for apartments in Austin. That afternoon, Janet called. Good news and weird news, Peyton. We have 3 showings tomorrow. Weird news, your father called my office, said he needed to speak to you about family business. I laughed. He has my number, Janet. I just know he's blocked it. Should I tell him anything? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Tell him the house is selling. There is nothing to discuss. The sound of an electronic pulse swells into a clean, modern synth melody, bright and forward-moving. The sound of a for sale sign being hammered into the ground, and the satisfied, deep huff of a dog who has officially clocked out for the day fade into a crisp, expectant silence. The showings went better than I ever expected. By Sunday evening, my modest little ranch was the subject of a bidding war. I accepted an offer, $20,000 above asking. Clean, fast, final. I texted my cousin Marcus in Denver. House sold. Austin. Remote work approved. Holy hell, he replied. You actually did it. For 3 days, there was a blissful silence. I packed boxes and donated clothes I'd kept out of obligation. Then, on the 4th day, the garage door groaned open. My heart hammered. Footsteps echoed through the kitchen. I looked up to see Colin Webster standing in my living room, staring at the half-empty space like a crime scene. What the hell, Peyton? He said, his voice cracking. You're actually doing it. The garage code still works, he added when I told him he couldn't just watch in. I'm changing it today. What do you want? Colin ran a hand through his hair. Mom's a wreck. Dad's furious. This is extreme, Peyton. You're being petty. Clear boundaries feel extreme when you've never had them, I said, reaching for the packing tape. He sat on my couch without asking. I need help, Pay. We're looking at a $4,000 gap this month. Get a job, Colin. I'm trying. Try harder. I've never quit jobs in 1 year. I've never spent money I didn't have and expected someone else to fix it. Shiam, who usually loved visitors, didn't run to Colin. Instead, he stood stiff-legged between us. He let out a low, vibrating growl, the kind that comes from deep in the chest. It wasn't aggressive, it was a warning. He was guarding the perimeter of my new life. He knew the golden child wasn't here to visit. He was here to hunt. So that's it? Colin snapped, standing abruptly. You're just done with us? I'm done being used, I called after him as he headed for the door. No more loans, no bailouts, no emergencies that require my credit card. That's cold, he muttered. That's boundaries, I replied. He slammed the door so hard the remaining pictures on my walls rattled. Shiam, who usually loved visitors, trotted to the door, gave it one final authoritative bark, and then looked back at me, his head tilted. He knew the code was broken. He knew the locks were changing, not just on the garage, but on my life. For the first time, I knew I wasn't the one who had to fix it. I looked at the empty spaces on the walls. They didn't feel lonely. They felt like room to breathe. 2 weeks before closing, the driveway gravel crunched again. I didn't even have to look at the security camera. I could feel the shift in the air, that heavy, humid pressure that always preceded a Novak family storm. I looked through the sidelight window. Ellie Holt was standing there, and she wasn't alone. She had 7-year-old Tyler and 5-year-old Madison with her. They were wearing matching t-shirts that said, "I heart my Aunt Peyton." It was a tactical strike, pure psychological warfare. I opened the door. Tyler ran forward for a hug. I'm not a monster, and I've always loved those kids, mostly because I was the only adult in their lives not vibrating with resentment. "Ellie," said Peyton, her voice bright and artificial, "the kids really wanted to see you before the big change." "Hi, Ellie," I said, my voice flat. Madison hung back, looking shy. "Mommy says you're moving. Why?" "Mommy said maybe you could help us more if you didn't have a big house payment." He'd been coached. The words were too clunky for a 7-year-old. I felt a surge of cold anger. I knelt down. Tyler, Madison, why don't you go check the backyard? I think Shiam left some toys out there for you. The kids bolted. Shiam, usually a lazy loaf, trotted after them, his little tail wagging. He seemed to understand the assignment. Keep the kids busy while the adults dealt with the wreckage. I stood up and looked at Ellie. Using your children as human shields is disgusting, Ellie. Her polished smile cracked. I'm desperate, Peyton. Colin is a mess. We might lose everything. The car, the kids' activities. Then downsize, I said. Cut the cable. Stop buying designer candles. We can't live like that, she cried. I did, I reminded her. I lived in a 1-bedroom with a radiator that sounded like a dying whale so I could pay off Colin's student loans. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. You have so much, she hissed, the mask finally dropping. You're just selfish. I have so much because I saved while you spent, and I'm keeping what's left of my sanity. When they left, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't lonely, it was solid. I watched their car pull away, and Shiam came back inside, sitting heavily on my feet. He looked up at me, his breathing rhythmic and calm. You can't save people who refuse to grab the rope, and for the first time in 34 years, I wasn't even going to try to throw it. The house was empty, but my heart was full of a quiet, steel-edged peace. Austin felt like a reset button I didn't know life had. The air was warmer, the sky was wider, and nobody in this city knew my last name well enough to attach it to an expectation. I moved into a 1-bedroom downtown. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that let in real sunlight instead of guilt. My job approved my full remote status without a blink. Within a month, my shoulders dropped an inch away from my ears. I slept better. I laughed without checking my phone for the inevitable crisis. Shiam adapted with surprising grace. He traded the suburban backyard for a dog park 3 blocks away. He didn't miss the Novak house. He missed the peace. Then I met Francesco Caldwell. It was a Tuesday at a coffee shop. I was there for the Wi-Fi. He was there because his laptop had died. Mind if I steal this? He asked, pointing to the chair. He had dry humor in his eyes and a calm energy. Only if you promise not to talk, I said, barely looking up from my code. He smiled. Deal. We broke the rule 5 minutes later. Francesco worked in product design. He listened without interrupting. When I told him, vaguely, about my family, he didn't flinch. He didn't say, but they're your parents. He just leaned back and said, that sounds exhausting. I'm glad you got out. No judgment, no pressure. We took it slow. Dinners, long walks with Shiam, who actually liked Francesco, a rare endorsement. A relationship built without chaos felt suspicious at first, like I was waiting for a hidden fee. But peace, it turns out, doesn't charge interest. 3 months in, my life was unrecognizable. I got promoted to lead. My salary was a number that would have triggered family emergencies, except they didn't know. Then the past showed up in a way I didn't expect. Allie Savage. Francesco mentioned her casually, the ex who still had stuff at his place, the dog they used to share. I didn't think much of it until Allie Savage started liking my posts, old ones, random ones. Then came the message, you seem intense, just looking out for Francesco. I stared at the screen. I recognized the tactic immediately. It was the Novak playbook, just bound in a different cover. Plant doubt, step back, let it grow. I looked at Shiam, who was chewing on a squeaky toy Francesco had bought him. I'd spent 34 years learning how to spot a trap. I wasn't going to let another person's narrative rewrite my piece. Not now, not ever. The acoustic guitar is joined by a deep, confident bass line, grounded and unbreakable. The sound of a phone being flipped face down on a wooden table and the playful squeak-squeak of a dog toy fade into a quiet, empowered silence. I recognized the tactic immediately. Allie Savage wasn't attacking. She was looking out. It was the same role Michelle Novak used when she didn't get her way. I showed the message to Francesco Caldwell that evening on my balcony, the Austin skyline twinkling like a promise. Shiam was sprawled across Francesco's feet, snoring with the intensity of a small engine. "She reached out to you?" Francesco asked, his brow furrowing. "She's liking posts from 3 years ago, Francesco. It's a bit much." He sighed. "Allie has a hard time with doors closing. She likes to see if she can still blow a draft through the house. I've spent my life dealing with people who don't know how to close doors," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. "I didn't move 1,500 miles for this." He took my hand. His grip was steady. "You didn't. I'll handle it." And he did. He didn't make a scene. He simply set a boundary, blocked her, changed his settings, and chose clarity over comfort. That choice mattered more than any grand gesture. It told me I wasn't repeating the past. I was breaking it. But while the front in Austin was calming, the one back home was reaching a fever pitch. My cousin Marcus called on a Tuesday. "They lost the house, Peyton." I closed my eyes, leaning against the counter. "Foreclosure?" "Yeah. Tess and Michelle are moving into a rental, and guess who's coming? Colin and Ellie. All of them crammed into a 3-bedroom. It's a disaster zone. Your mom's telling everyone you abandoned the children, that you chose a fancy life over your own blood." I looked at Shiam, chasing his tail in the living room, oblivious to the character assassination 1,000 miles away. Some part of me hoped that when the money stopped, the manipulation might too. Then, a week later, a number I didn't recognize lit up my phone. "Peyton," my father's voice said. He sounded older, thinner. "We need to talk." "No," I replied, my voice as calm as the Texas morning. "You want to talk. There's a difference." "Your brother is trying," Tess pushed. "Things are hard. We're all under one roof. You're doing so well. You could help, just temporarily." I laughed softly. "Dad, if the first thing you say after months of silence is about money, then nothing has changed. You aren't calling for a daughter, you're calling for a solution." "You're being selfish," he barked. "No," I said, watching Shiam finally catch his tail and tumble over. "I'm recovering." I hung up and blocked the number. For the first time, the pattern didn't pull me back in. It snapped. The ghost in the feed and the ghosts from my past were finally finding out that this house is locked, and I'm the only one with the key. Thanksgiving came and went without me. That sentence would have crushed an earlier version of myself, the Peyton who measured her worth in attendance and sacrifice. This version of me spent the holiday in Austin, barefoot in Francesco Caldwell's kitchen, chopping sage. There was no tension, no landmines disguised as conversation starters. Francesco's friends drifted in and out, laughter happened organically. Someone spilled red wine and apologized, like it was a normal mistake, not a moral failing. Francesco leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" I realized then that I was more than okay. I was safe. And that scared me just enough to remind me how unfamiliar peace still was. 2 days later, the past tried again. It always does. The call came from an unknown number. Something in me, curiosity or a final need for closure, made me answer. "Peyton," my father said too quickly, "it's Tess." "I know," I said. "You used Mom's phone last time. Whose is this?" "That's not important." "It is to me." His voice dropped, turning gravelly and manipulative. "Your mother isn't doing well. She's not Michelle Novak right now. She cries every night. She feels like she lost a daughter." I leaned against my kitchen counter. "That's hard for her," I said evenly. "Don't be cold." "I'm not being cold. I'm being accurate." Then he said it. "Colin and Ellie, they're struggling. The kids are confused. This isn't how families are supposed to work, Peyton. You've always been the strong one." There it was, the crown I never asked for.
The strong one doesn't mean the sacrificial one, I said. Shiam is sitting right here, Dad. Even a dog knows when to stop barking at a wall that won't move. He punishing us, he insisted. No, I replied. I stopped rescuing you. That one landed. His voice lost its certainty. So that's it? You're just done with us? I'm done being used, I said. If you want a relationship, it has to be one where I'm a daughter, not a solution. He didn't answer. I hung up and blocked the number. I felt a strange, hollow relief. Not triumph, not anger, just the realization that for the first time, I didn't have to explain myself twice. I looked down at Shiam, who was nudging my hand for a scrap of turkey. He wasn't worried about the empty chair at the Novak table. He was focused on the one person who had finally learned how to fill her own. The audit was final, the debt was canceled, and the kitchen was finally quiet.
The fallout back home was reaching a fever pitch. Marcus called one night, his voice hushed like a war zone report. They've moved the fight to the public square, Peyton, he said. Your mom is on a posting spree. Old photos of you and Colin as kids, captions about loyalty and a mother's broken heart. She's telling everyone you abandoned Ellie's kids, that you chose a fancy life in Austin over your own blood. I froze, gripping the counter. Shiam sensed the spike in my cortisol. He hopped off the sofa and rested his heavy little head on my foot. His warm weight was a physical anchor, pulling me back from the cliff of a panic attack. So that's the narrative. I'm the villain who left children to starve. Marcus told me he'd been defending me, but they blocked him too. Tess is calling it protecting the family unit. I wasn't surprised, but the disappointment was a dull ache. Manipulation doesn't disappear, it just changes its clothes. And then the toxicity crossed state lines. Allie Savage resurfaced. She didn't contact me directly, she was smarter than that. Francesco Caldwell came home looking quieter than usual. One of my coworkers pulled me aside. He said, apparently, Allie's been expressing concern. She's telling people she heard from your family that you're unstable and I should be careful. The room felt small. The old fear whispered, here it is, the moment he chooses the easier story. I didn't over-explain. I just looked him in the eye. Do you want to hear my side, or have you already decided? Francesco looked at me like I'd said something painful. He pulled me toward him. Peyton, I already know your side. I've seen how you flinch when your phone vibrates. I don't care what she says, he whispered. I just needed to decide how public I wanted to be about choosing you. That night, he posted a photo of us on a hike. No drama, no long-winded defense. Just us, smiling, with Shiam sitting proudly in the foreground. The caption was simple, peace looks good on us. Allie Savage blocked him within the hour. It was a small victory, but back in the Novak household, the pressure cooker was about to blow. They were losing their grip, and when a predator loses its meal, it gets desperate. I looked down at Shiam, who was now snoring softly on my foot. He didn't care about the public square. He only cared that I was still standing. And for the first time, I knew the walls of my new life were high enough to keep the ghosts out. A week later, my brother showed up in Austin. Unannounced, unexpected, standing outside my building at 8:14 a.m. on a Saturday. I knew it was him before I even checked the intercom. Some instincts never fade, like the specific way Colin Webster shifts his weight when he's nervous. I didn't open the door immediately. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from the exhaustion of his persistence. Shiam was already at the door, his nose pressed to the crack. He wasn't growling this time. He was silent, his stubby tail giving a single hesitant wag. I opened the door. Colin looked smaller. He'd lost weight. His skin had a sallow tint. He looked like someone who had finally run out of excuses. "How did you find me?" I asked, not moving to let him in. "Marcus," he admitted, looking at his shoes. I pushed him until he cracked. "Why are you here, Colin? If it's for the $4,000, the answer is still no." "I'm not here for money," he said, exhaling a shaky breath. "I'm here to apologize." I stayed silent.
In the Novak family, apologies usually came with a price tag, a but that negated everything. I waited for it. You were right, he continued. I used you. I told myself it was okay because we're family, but it was just convenient. It was easier to let you drown than to learn how to swim. I studied his face, looking for the tell, the deflection, the bargaining. There was none, only a raw, ugly kind of shame. I lost everything, Pay, he added. The house is gone. Ellie Holt and the kids are cramped into that apartment with Tess and Michelle. It's loud, it's angry, and for the first time, I don't have anyone else to blame. That's new for you, I said. He flinched but didn't argue. I'm working. 2 jobs. Warehouse on weekdays, pizza delivery on weekends. Ellie got a job too, medical billing. It's entry level and it sucks, but we're doing it. I looked at Shiam. The little Frenchie trotted over and sniffed his pant leg. Colin reached down, his hand trembling, and scratched behind Shiam's ears. It was the first time I'd seen my brother interact with something without wondering what he could get from it. Thank you for saying it, I said finally. It matters. Do you think maybe someday, he asked. Maybe, I replied. On my terms, when I'm ready, and never with my bank account involved. He nodded. That's fair. I'll see you around, Peyton. After Colin left, I didn't collapse. I stood in my kitchen, coffee cooling in my mug, listening to the quiet hum of a life that no longer required me to brace for impact. Francesco Caldwell rested his chin on my shoulder. That was him, he said. You okay? I checked my pulse, my breathing. I think I am, I whispered. I was okay because Colin's apology didn't cost me anything. It didn't demand access or a hidden invoice. For the first time, I got to decide what to do with the truth. That week, something shifted. The frantic calls from Tess stopped. The loyalty posts from Michelle Novak lost their rhythm. It was like they finally realized I wasn't going to cave. Not today, not ever. Shiam felt the change, too. He stopped sleeping with one eye open by the door and reclaimed the center of the living room rug, sprawling out like a king who knew his borders were secure. Christmas came. I spent it in San Antonio with Francesco's family. They were warm and loud in a harmless way. They were curious about my life, not my usefulness. No one asked me to pay for the ham. It was a strange, good kind of strange. On New Year's Eve, I got an email from Ellie Holt. Please read this. Against my judgment, I clicked. She didn't ask for money. She told me Colin was still at the warehouse. Exhausting, unimpressive, but real. They'd moved into a tiny 2-bedroom. It's hard, she wrote, but we're doing it ourselves. I read it twice. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because closure doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes it just requires knowing that reality has finally caught up to the people who spent a lifetime running from it. 6 months in, I ran into someone from my old neighborhood at a tech meetup. Peyton Fraser? He said. Smart move getting out. Your brother's? Well, he's kind of a lot. I smiled politely, scratching Shiam behind the ears. You have no idea, I said. I looked around the room, at the people who knew me as a lead engineer, a colleague, a friend, not an ATM, not a safety net, just Peyton. I walked toward the exit, my hand resting on Shiam's harness. The audit was over. The books were balanced. And for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone a single cent of my soul. 8 months into my life in Austin, Francesco Caldwell and I moved into a 2-bedroom near a wooded trail. We adopted a 3-legged cat named Biscuit, who loved Shiam with a fierce devotion. Life was stable and honest. Yet when you survive a family like the Novaks, you develop a phantom limb. You brace for a slap that never comes. I'd be at dinner laughing, and my hand would instinctively twitch toward my phone, checking for the emergency text. "You're doing it again," Francesco said softly one evening, covering my hand, waiting for the floor to drop. "Peyton, the floor is solid here. I checked the joists myself." I smiled. It's hard to stop looking for cracks when you spent 30 years falling through them. Shiam was sprawled under the table, his chin on Francesco's shoe. He'd moved on months ago. He didn't remember the screaming or how Tess would calculate my salary out loud. But then, a physical letter arrived from Michelle Novak. I let it sit for 3 days. Shiam sniffed it once and walked away, disinterested. When I opened it, I expected a manifesto of guilt. Instead, it was a single photo of Tyler and Madison on a hand-me-down rug in their cramped apartment. On the back, in my mother's shaky script, "They ask where you are. I tell them you're finding yourself." No request for money, no "we're starving," just a statement of fact. It was the first time my mother used my name without a dollar sign attached, a quiet acknowledgement that I wasn't coming back to be their bridge. I sat on my kitchen floor, the Texas sun hitting the tiles, and I didn't feel the urge to call or send a check. I just felt the weight of the photograph. It was a heavy thing, but it wasn't a burden. It was just a memory. I tucked it into a drawer and went back to work. I had a sprint to finish, and for the first time, my code was the only thing I had to debug. My family was finally learning to live without me, and I was finally learning to live without the fear of them. I looked at Shiam, who was now curled up with Biscuit in a patch of sunlight. The audit wasn't just closed, the books were archived. I was finally, truly home. The music, the ambient track, swells into a final crystalline piano chord, clear and lingering. The sound of a laptop lid closing with a satisfied click and the soft, synchronized breathing of a dog and a cat napping together create a sense of deep, settled contentment. 8 months into my life in Austin, Francesco Caldwell and I moved into a 2-bedroom near a wooded trail. We adopted a 3-legged cat named Biscuit, who loved Shiam with a fierce devotion. Life was stable and honest. Yet when you survive a family like the Novaks, you develop a phantom limb. You brace for a slap that never comes. I'd be at dinner laughing, and my hand would instinctively twitch toward my phone, checking for the emergency text. "You're doing it again," Francesco said softly one evening, covering my hand, waiting for the floor to drop. "Peyton, the floor is solid here. I checked the joists myself." I smiled. It's hard to stop looking for cracks when you spent 30 years falling through them. Shiam was sprawled under the table, his chin on Francesco's shoe. He'd moved on months ago. He didn't remember the screaming or how Tess would calculate my salary out loud. But then, a physical letter arrived from Michelle Novak. I let it sit for 3 days. Shiam sniffed it once and walked away, disinterested. When I opened it, I expected a manifesto of guilt. Instead, it was a single photo of Tyler and Madison on a hand-me-down rug in their cramped apartment. On the back, in my mother's shaky script, "They ask where you are. I tell them you're finding yourself." No request for money, no "we're starving," just a statement of fact. It was the first time my mother used my name without a dollar sign attached, a quiet acknowledgement that I wasn't coming back to be their bridge. I sat on my kitchen floor, the Texas sun hitting the tiles, and I didn't feel the urge to call or send a check. I just felt the weight of the photograph. It was a heavy thing, but it wasn't a burden. It was just a memory. I tucked it into a drawer and went back to work. I had a sprint to finish, and for the first time, my code was the only thing I had to debug. My family was finally learning to live without me, and I was finally learning to live without the fear of them. I looked at Shiam, who was now curled up with Biscuit in a patch of sunlight. The audit wasn't just closed, the books were archived. I was finally, truly home. The music, the ambient track, swells into a final crystalline piano chord, clear and lingering. The sound of a laptop lid closing with a satisfied click and the soft, synchronized breathing of a dog and a cat napping together create a sense of deep, settled contentment.
The peace I'd cultivated in Austin was finally yielding results. By the end of my first year, I wasn't just a lead engineer, I was being scouted for a director-level position. It was the kind of success that once would have felt like a target on my back, a larger number for Tess and Michelle Novak to divide among their creditors. But now it was just a career milestone. My LinkedIn was a fortress. Francesco Caldwell was the one who pushed me. "You're playing small because you're still hiding, Peyton," he said while we walked Shiam. "You're afraid if you get too big, they'll see you." I looked at Shiam, befriending a disinterested golden retriever. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who loves you. I took the interview in a suit that cost more than my first car. I wasn't the girl subsidizing Colin Webster's failed companies anymore. I was a woman who built systems that didn't break. When the offer letter came with a signing bonus that made my head spin, I didn't call my mother. I took Shiam to the pet store for the most ridiculous, oversized orthopedic bed they had. But in the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A Google alert for my own name. Ali Savage had posted a blog, The Cost of Boundaries. She talked about a friend's partner who abandoned a struggling family for a tech bro lifestyle. She weaponized the kid's trauma and called me unaccountable. I felt the old heat rising in my neck. Then a message from an unknown number. Saw the post. Is it true? Are you really making that much while we're in this hellhole? Colin. The apology from 6 months ago felt like a lifetime away. When the warehouse grind got too heavy, the old habits were just a click away. The bridge hadn't been built. It had just been waiting for a reason to burn. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I looked at Shiam in the back seat, his tongue lolling out, happy and oblivious. I put the phone in the glove box, started the car, and drove to get him that bed. The Novak cycle was trying to restart, but I was no longer the fuel. I was the architect of a world they couldn't afford to live in, and for the first time, I didn't care if they liked the view from the outside. The message from Colin Webster sat in my notifications like a dormant virus. Is it true? It was the same question my family had asked for 2 decades, always a challenge. Success was never a celebration in the Novak household. It was a taxable event. If I was doing well, I was holding out. If I was struggling, I was just like Colin. I didn't delete the text. I just looked at it until the words blurred. Shiam was snoring on his new massive orthopedic bed, his paws twitching as he chased dream rabbits. He didn't care about my director title. He didn't care about Ali Savage's blog or the wellness of people who only called when the bill was due. "He's back, isn't he?" Francesco Caldwell asked from the doorway of my office. "He never really left," I said. "The apology was just a key to the vault. When it didn't work, he went back to the script." Francesco put his hands on my shoulders. "Peyton, you're the woman who just signed a contract that could buy 10 of your old cars." "I know," I whispered, "but the ghost of the girl I used to be is still screaming that I'm a monster for having a savings account." "Let her scream," Francesco said firmly. "She's allowed to be loud, but she's not allowed to drive the car." That night, I went to Ali Savage's blog. I didn't read the comments. I looked at the header, a stock image of a lonely woman at a rainy window. I realized then, Ali and my family were 2 sides of the same coin. They needed me to be the villain so they could be the martyrs. If I was happy, their narrative of being abandoned fell apart. I was their mirror, and they hated what they saw. I picked up my phone. I didn't type a long defense or mention the $60,000 I'd already burned for them. I just sent one text back to Colin. "It's true. I worked for it. I hope your double shifts are going well. Keep at it." I put the phone on the nightstand and turned off the light. Shiam let out a long, contented sigh from his bed. For the first time, the Novak guilt didn't keep me awake. It was just background noise, the hum of a city I no longer lived in. But a cornered family is a dangerous thing, and Michelle Novak wasn't done playing her final card. When the mirror doesn't break, they try to smash the person holding it. I looked at the shadow of Shiam in the dark, his ears twitching at a distant sound. The audit was closed,
But the Novak cycle was about to go for broke, and this time they weren't sending a text, they were coming for the image itself. The piece didn't shatter, it curdled. A week after my text to Colin Webster, the tactical nuke dropped. A life update video from Michelle Novak. She sat in her cramped kitchen, talking about a daughter's love having a price tag she couldn't afford. And then she brought them on camera, Tyler and Madison. They looked tired. "We miss you, Aunt Peyton," Tyler said, prompted by a whisper from Ellie Holt off camera. "Why don't you love us anymore?" I watched it once, my hands shaking. Shiam jumped onto the sofa, sensing the spike in my heart rate. He leaned his solid, warm ribcage against my arm, a silent anchor in a rising tide of nausea. "They're using the kids, Francesco," I whispered. "They're actually doing it." Francesco Caldwell watched the video, his jaw tightening. "This isn't a family, Peyton. This is a hostage situation. If you send money, you prove them right, that your love is a transaction. If you go back, you're just the ATM again. What do you want to do?" I looked at Shiam. He remembered those kids. He remembered the backyard. But he also remembered the way I used to cry into his fur after every Sunday lunch. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Colin. Instead, I called a lawyer Marcus had recommended. "I want to set up an educational trust," I told him, "locked. Only for their future. No rent, no cars, no emergencies." The legal letter was specific. Any further public use of my name or the children's likeness to harass me would result in an immediate freeze and a defamation suit. I wasn't bailing out Colin's latest mistake. I was building a bridge for the children that didn't require me to be the toll taker. The reaction was instantaneous. My inbox exploded. "Mom, how could you? Locking money away while we can't pay the electric bill." "Colin, you think you're better than us because you can hire lawyers?" I didn't feel the sting this time. I felt the distance. I looked at the "for sale" sign in the background of my mind and realized it had finally been taken down. The property was sold. The debt was settled. I wasn't sharing my wealth the way they wanted. I was protecting the only part of that family that still had a chance. I looked at Shiam, who had finally settled back into a nap, his head resting on my knee. He knew the predator had been declawed. The morning after the trust was finalized, the silence in Austin felt different. It wasn't the hollow silence of a house under siege. It was the dense, satisfied quiet of a closed book. I stood on the balcony, watching the sun catch the glass of the skyline. Shiam was beside me, his front paws on the railing, his nose twitching in the humid Texas air. He looked settled. Glossy coat, steady breathing, no longer the frantic dog hiding under a dining table while people screamed about money. My phone buzzed on the bistro table. I didn't flinch. It was a final message from Marcus. "They're furious about the trust. Tess tried to call the lawyer to borrow against it for an SUV. The lawyer laughed. They've stopped posting, Peyton." "The narrative doesn't work if the villain is paying for the kids' college," I smiled. I didn't feel triumph, just a profound sense of distance, like looking at a map of a country I no longer recognized. Francesco Caldwell walked out with 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't ask if I was okay. He could see it. "We're clear," he asked softly. "We're clear," I said. "The bridge is built for the kids, but the gate is locked for the adults. I'm a daughter, not a solution. And since they don't want a daughter, they don't get anything else." Francesco laughed. "Good, because Biscuit is planning a takeover of the guest room, and I need a lead engineer to help negotiate." I laughed too, a real deep laugh that wasn't a performance. I thought about that $8 latte. I thought about the $60,000 I'd set on fire trying to buy a love that was never for sale. Family helps family is a beautiful sentiment on a two-way street, but it's a death sentence at a dead end.
I looked at Shiam. He'd been the only one who didn't want my bank account. He just wanted to walk beside me. Hundreds of miles away, Colin Webster, Ellie Holt, and my parents were living the lives they had built with their own choices. They were no longer my responsibility to fix, my chaos to subsidize, or my guilt to carry. I turned back toward the apartment, toward the life I'd built from the ashes of their expectations. I wasn't the strong one anymore. I was just Peyton, and for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. I stepped inside and closed the door. The lock clicked, a soft, final sound. No more ghosts, no more audits, just the sunlight on the floor and the steady weight of a friend at my heels. I kept walking, and I didn't look back, not even once.